My name is Matt Zettek. I'm the Sustainability Coordinator for the town of Holliston. I'm really pleased to be with you today to learn from you about recycling, waste reduction, reuse. Also talk to you about some of my experiences in that and the town program and sort of the background on why we have to recycle in Holliston and other towns and communities in Massachusetts. Also, you know, a lot of people wonder, hey, I put that stuff out at the curb, I take the time to do the right thing at home, put the recycling out at the curb, where does it go? What happens to it? Same type of thing with the other materials that we generated at home, whether it's food waste, food scraps. Again, that's a big component of what we generated at our home that ends up going out as waste or as compost. Where does that go? What happens to that, depending on how we actually process it? So again, I just wanted to start here. Holliston has been a leader in recycling for a long time. Just want to really highlight that. My first paid job in the recycling field and sustainability was almost 30 years ago. I had just finished working in the State House for a wonderful state representative, and the state was looking for somebody to work with 20 towns in the area to try to help them with the recycling at the time. Because again, recycling was just starting in terms of a town service. And whether it was at a drop-off program or the new curbside services that were starting. So Holliston, actually the state planned to build a recycling processing facility in Holliston at that time. And then there was resistance from the local folks. If some of you may remember that if you were in Holliston at the time. And the state ended up, along with the town, saying, thanks for that opportunity, but we don't really want to have a recycling facility here in Holliston. We want to recycle. And again, the town has been doing a great job even before this project didn't take place with that facility. Holliston was doing a great job, and they still are. So even though I was hired after the town and the state said, no, we're not going to put that recycling plant in Holliston. And they were looking for somebody to help Holliston and the other 20 towns in the Millis Consortium figure out how can the state help the towns get recycling more as a standard part of the town service, because at the time it was just starting out and the cost to recycle was very high. So just briefly, back at the time, the idea was to put a recycling facility at the abandoned quality beverage plant down in the Lowland Street area. If for folks who are long-standing Holliston folks, you probably remember that. So again, Holliston was a leader, and what we found at the time was almost everything we do with our recycling program in Holliston is determined by what the state tells us we have to do. So the state, going back to the 1980s, if we can go to that waistband page for a second, going back to the 1980s, the state sort of realized that up until then we were just tossing everything, people were bringing everything up to the dump, pretty much.
Wait, now, which one?
This is the, let's see, this would be off the state website, the waistbands. Mass disposal, probably DEP waste disposal. Yeah, there you go, good deal. So again, everything at our local level is determined by the state. Well, thank you for the great question. So just to make sure everybody hears, since the plant wasn't built in Holliston, was it built somewhere else? Great question. So at the time, at that time, the state was hoping to build a whole series of public invested recycling sorting facilities. They'd already had plans to build one out in Springfield. This was going to be sort of the next one, and then they had hopes to build in different regions of Massachusetts. In part because of the failure of this opportunity, the state did not build any more recycling facilities. But when it ended up happening, but there's still the state funded one out in Springfield, that's the only one, and that really helps those towns out there big time. But the state basically let the private sector build these recycling sorting facilities as compared to them being publicly funded. So that's why you have the private sorting facility Harvey's has in Westboro, where our material goes, and we'll see a little bit more about that, but a great question. They were one of the companies, so going back to that project, no, we're not going to build a big facility to help the towns in the Holliston and in the immediate area. But when I met up with the officials after being hired in each of the towns, they said, hey, we sort of know it's pretty simple how to collect this stuff at the curb. It's pretty much similar to picking up trash. You get a truck and you go pick it up, but the hard part is there are not that many places to bring the recyclables, and at the time it was really costly because there were just so few facilities that could handle the materials. So basically I got the towns together, we went out to bid, instead of each town going out on their own to try to find the market. With the help of a really sharp attorney, we worked, and we had a document that had signatures of 20 towns. Basically, it greatly increased our buying power and what we had to offer by putting all the recyclables from the 20 towns together, and we got a much, much better price than anybody in the Commonwealth had at the time. At the lowest cost to get rid of get rid of a ton of recyclables at the time was $28.50. That's what a town would have to pay. That was the lowest cost. We got it down to $7.50 per ton. So it was a great boon, and it really helped the towns in the areas because they didn't have to come up with exorbitant costs and not be able to recycle because of the cost. So it was a big help. So basically it's a state that dictates what we have to do at the local level with our programs. So they came up with these waste bans starting in the 1980s when they realized that because we were dumping everything into those landfills, our groundwater was getting contaminated. And there were other pollution-related problems because we didn't know what we were doing. So they started to say, hey, we got to get this stuff out of, we got to stop those things that are really causing the pollution out of going to the landfill, and we're going to ban them from being tossed out as trash. So back then it was tires, refrigerators, sort of those basic things that you would think were pretty obviously polluting. But since the 1980s, when they started their waste bans, the state continues to add new items to the waste ban list. If you can go down a little bit, there's a sort of a description. Now keep going, and you'll see a list here. So these are the materials currently banned or will be banned. So asphalt, brick, and concrete, these are parts of the construction and demolition type materials that we just were talking about that goes through that Covanta facility. You've got gypsum wall board, that's also part of the construction and demolition debris. Metals, glass and metal containers, lead acid batteries, those are car batteries. Those are one of the first ones because they knew those were really polluting the landfills and the groundwater supplies. You got leaves and yard waste. Probably about roughly 20 years ago, they started banning computers and televisions. If you remember, you may remember that. You used to just put them out, and all of a sudden you had to pay a fee to have those things picked up and handled appropriately. So I'm partly mentioning that because coming up soon, there's going to be a ban on mattresses and box springs, as well as textiles. So that's going to start in November. The town's developing its plan on how we're going to be able to implement that ban. But in particular, I'm mentioning the textiles because just a couple months ago, we expanded the textile program here in town, and we have one right out thanks to the good folks here. There's an opportunity for folks to recycle, get their clothing, linen, and footwear recycled or reused through that textile program. So now so that's sort of the background. And again, up until these waste bans came into play, for the most part, we were either bringing our stuff to the local dump, or in our case, I know, and I've talked to many folks in town here as well, food waste. So I'm the last of 5 kids. One of my first chores was probably, if there was any scraps left on the plates at the end of the dinner, I'd scrape them onto one plate, and I'd walk out down the porch stairs to the 6 steps down there, and there was a little hole in the ground. I'd put my foot on the hopper, lift up the thing, and in the little plastic thing in there, and put the food scraps. And then roughly once a week, I'm not sure, I was pretty small at the time, but once a week or every 2 weeks, the pig farmer came by and picked those up. What a great system, right? Food scraps getting picked up by a local business person, reusing them, feeding her animals, not having to go out and purchase things, so it's making the business more affordable for the pig farmer. No driving the stuff all around to a incinerator to burn it or whatever it's going to take. So it's all kept local, supporting things locally. Again, things have changed, so we now have waste bans in play. We've got curbside services in play for our trash, our recyclables, and even potentially the food waste, which we'll get into in a minute. So if we can maybe swing over to the town website page, because I'd like to and please keep asking questions as we go through, because your input's always welcome and appreciated. So what do we do here in the town of Holliston? Extensive program. We've got the 2 main curbside services everybody participates in with the trash and the recycling. And if we bring it down, we'll just continue down through the services. So that's talking about the, we started up with the trash. This is talking about the recycling. So this is really important because the rules have changed over the years dramatically from when we were just first getting recycling going 30 plus years ago. As volunteers, I remember it was initially a drop-off program, but we'd have to climb after the day ended for the public. As volunteers, we'd have to climb into the big container where people threw their glass, their bottles. And back then, if there was a cork left in there, we'd have to get that cork off. Or labels, there were labels, people would naturally leave labels, but back in the early days, we had to prepare the materials so much more before putting them out for recycling. The metal foil on the wine bottles, that would contaminate the load back in the day, so it was just interesting to see what happens. Things have come so far that it's now we have this single stream recycling, right? Because they've made it easy for us at home the companies have tried to make it as easy, and the government have tried to make it as easy as possible for us to recycle at home, so we get more people doing it, and that's why we now have this single stream recycling where you can put all your bottles, your plastic, metal, and glass bottles in the same container along with your paper products, and then it goes to a recycling facility and gets sorted, and we'll see that in a minute. So again, the rules have changed, especially going back to the early days, but they still continue to change. And as we talked about before, there's not like a series of public, state-owned recycling facilities so the state can set the same rules at each of the places, right? We don't have that, so we're relying on the private industry. And each of those different companies can maybe have a different set of rules on what can get recycled. So knowing that's been a challenge, and we had some good questions earlier on, just before we started the presentation about, hey, can I recycle this? The state has set up a website, and it's on our town website on how to get there, about checking to see if something's actually recyclable. And that's where if we go down to this, and they try to describe, the overall program is called Recycle Smart, but they have a little recyclopedia, like an encyclopedia, to try and determine to help you understand what can be recycled or what to do with the material. All right, so when she typed in styrofoam, they brought up styrofoam meat tray, styrofoam blocks and containers, styrofoam insulation, so even within styrofoam, different components, because just as she's pick one. You want to go with the styrofoam meat tray that was mentioned? Try that baby right there. Let's see what it says. Let's see if it confirms what I said. Put this item in your trash bin. Yep. So it's polystyrene / styrofoams. It's always been a tough beast, always is. I've volunteered doing river cleanups. When you're pulling that stuff out of the rivers and stuff, it's very frustrating. Styrofoam blocks and containers. Put this item in your trash. Great question. She has a habit of washing everything before putting it out in the recycling container. Again, it's what we've been told to do. We want to prepare the materials appropriately so when they go to the facility for sorting, they're not coming up they're not contaminating and reducing the value of what we are putting out for recycling. So the answer to your question is, can you mind bringing up maybe the Harvey video here, because that'll help out there. And this is a descript. This actually will show you what happens to the materials once we put them out at the curb and then get picked up in terms of what happens.
Hi, I'm Ben Harvey, president and one of the owners of E.L. Harvey & Sons, one of the nation's leading trash and recycling businesses located in the heart of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. E.L. Harvey is a 100-year-old company, and for over half of a century, we have offered innovative recycling services to our numerous client companies before recycling was ever popular. We are proud to be one of the forerunners in this area and continue to bring the newest innovations to life in the recycling world. One of our primary goals has been to lead the implementation of technology to enhance and improve recycling, which we have executed with great success. Nationally renowned for our capabilities and ability to get results for our clients in numerous industries, we continue to seek ways of bringing groundbreaking practices to our industry to lead with best practices in waste management and recycling. E.L. Harvey has always been innovative in all recycling practices. You will see that our new single-stream operation is evidence of our strong commitment to recycling. It is my pleasure to show you our newest single-stream recycling building. Please join me on this tour, and thank you for your interest. Behind me, you will see what is typical for a single-stream recycling facility. As I said before, it's a very mechanized system. The material comes in all mixed together. Then it goes through a series of screens, of floats, of mechanical and manual separation to get the products that we want. So we're going to try to walk through the system and walk through the steps that we take here in Westboro to make a recyclable product at the end of the day. Behind me, you see a normal pile of single-stream recycling that is coming in from other municipalities. The material comes in all mixed together. It goes to the metering bin to my left. The metering bin puts a nice level layer of material on the inbound conveyor that goes up to our first picking sorting area. From there, the material goes through a set of screens, which hopefully we'll be able to show you in a moment. So this is our first pre-sort. And what we attempt to do here is take out materials that are too big to go through the system. If you've thrown small appliances or pails, 5-gallon pails, or other types of plastics, film plastic, that might hurt our system or do damage to our system, this is what comes out first. And then the material continues to flow through the rest of the system. After it goes through the pre-sort, it goes through a set of screens that pulls out the larger pieces of cardboard. You can see the cardboard that kind of hops up on top of the screens. All of the other material, including newspaper, cereal boxes, bottles, cans, everything else falls down through the screens and it goes onto another conveyor to take it into another process. Also at this point, we cannot see is where the glass is broken and into smaller pieces, and then that goes out into a stockpile to send away to glass recycling. The material that's on the conveyor that you're looking at now is the material that came out of the first two screens, the cardboard screens. This is, again, going through a series of mechanical separation where the bottles and the cans are separated from all of the other fiber. The fiber goes onto a quality control conveyor. The bottles and cans go onto another conveyor and continue through the process. We actually have two sets of screen here, one that takes out the larger paper, and then another one we call a polishing screen to get out whatever fiber is left in the system. So after it goes through these two screens, the containers come up on that end conveyor over there, goes through the magnet, and then comes back down this conveyor where here everything is hand sorted. So it's what we call a positive pick. So each one of these guys has a different responsibility on the material that they're sorting out. And the only thing that's left on the belt as it goes the rest of the way is trash and PET and aluminum. Because we have a mechanical separation, it's actually an optical sorter which recognizes the plastic resin and kicks out the PET, and then the aluminum, we have a reverse eddy current that kicks out the aluminum. They do have optical sorters for the other plastics, but because of the cost, we didn't put them in, but eventually we probably will. Where PET, which is the soda bottles, that's the highest volume of the container line. That's why we put the optical on the PET sorter. So the soda bottles and water bottles are the ones that I was talking about that'll go through an optical sorter. And what it does, it goes through a scan with a lot of light, and it'll pick up the resin and it'll blow it off to the side and separate it out that way. It's quite a system. The material that's being fed onto the baler feed conveyor now are tin cans that have been separated by a magnet. This is our baler infeed, and these bunkers beside us here all have different fiber materials in them. You can see the paper, the cardboard, and when those materials, when those bunkers are full, we open up these doors, that material comes out on the feed conveyor, and then is fed into our baler. The baler makes bales that weigh approximately 1,500 to 2,000 pounds each, and from there, where they're loaded onto trailers and shipped to mills. The material that's blowing in the air here is paper that we're blowing off of our glass line. Because we want to keep the residue, we want to keep our glass, as much glass as possible. So we try to get the NGR, which is non-glass residue, out. And we're doing that by a fan. Most of this paper is from people that have home shredding systems and shred all of their documents and then put it into recycle. We do recycle this paper after it goes through the blowing system. So we've come full circle in the system. We've come from the beginning where we had all of this stuff mixed together to the end of the line where we have all of this product that is now ready to be shipped to the consuming mills throughout the world. The mixed fiber is going to mills in China. The cardboard is going to mills locally, most of it to upstate New York. The PET containers are going to facilities down in the south of the United States. There's a couple of mills in North Carolina that use that. The mixed color, high density polyethylene, all those nice pretty colors. And we will ship that to another plastics sorter, and they'll run that through that optical, so they'll get the polypropylene out, they'll get the whatever high density polyethylene is left in there, whatever PET, they'll just break everything down into its individual plastics. I hope you enjoyed the tour of our newest single stream recycling operation. We hope you found it both interesting and informative. Thank you.
Okay, so that's just a quick nutshell, but it sort of gives you an idea that, again, we're putting, at the home, we're putting stuff in one container, and then it goes to a facility where it's, even just the paper is being sorted into 3 different sorts, the cardboard and then different levels of mixed paper, a combination of machines and humans doing that sorting, and the same with the bottles and cans that we're putting out there. So you saw the paper blowing around that they said, hey, that's people's shredded paper. That's one of the items that, again, they state on that recyclopedia would say, don't put out with your recycling. And that's because the recycling facilities don't want to have to deal with all this stuff. Earlier, we had this wonderful question. I've got my prescription, I've got my supplements, and I want to recycle the bottle, and actually it says on the bottom that it's numbered, it's got the proper number on there, 1 through 7 with the triangle. I know I can do that, but the cap that it's on doesn't say anything. Is this cap good for recycling? Just before the presentation, we checked the recyclopedia, and it said, yes, recycle that bottle. And if it's the cap, if it's the same cap that came with that bottle, put it on it and recycle it. If it's just a loose cap, don't recycle it, because it's one of those items that ends up getting jammed in the trolleys and the trommels and the different conveyor belts that we just saw at the facility. So the same thing with the paper, shredded paper, it blows all over the place, things like that. So again, that's probably going to be a service. I'm going to see if we can have a shredded paper service when we do that Waste Zero event in the fall, so folks can bring their stuff from home there and have it done properly. The other little tidbit is to your question about like washing. How should we prepare it? Again, the state's going to say wash them thoroughly and prepare them, and you want to do that as much as you can, right? Because it's just the right thing to do. But at the same time, water is more important. It's one of the basics of life. We're on a water ban, so I personally, I don't use a lot of water to rinse out my recyclables. I try to be as smart as possible. I'm still working on my wife and our son on this one, so This is a firm out, a relish. Okay, I finish it, and it's all empty. So then, if I just let that sit after emptying it out, and there's still some stuff in there, and I go back to clean that later on, I'm going to use a lot more water because that stuff is sort of just caked on there. It takes just a little drop. When I've just finished, I put a little drop in there, and out, and it's empty. It's simple as pie. Same thing, tuna fish can, same thing. I'll just take that off. If you leave it in there, just a little bit, I'm the last of 5 again. I'm getting every little bit out of there because I was just glad to find any scraps as a kid. So
Understand you that we don't need to wash them?
you do need to try to get them clean, but I'm just suggesting you use as little water as possible so that you're conserving the water as a resource, as a primary resource, as compared to using a lot of water to try to clean them out. And I was just offering a little tip on how to, to use less water. So
You say the caps interfere with the process. So what do you do with just the caps?
So if you just have the cap, what the Recyclopedia said, put it in the trash.
Try.
In the trash, if it's just the cap.
Even if there's a number,
That's what it said, because again, they jam up the machines. And the companies don't want to jam up their machines and slow down the overall process. One of the biggest pushes in the last 10 years has been to try to get people to realize, don't put plastic bags in with your recycling. Those were like the #1 problems at these recycling sorting facilities. Those plastic bags get jammed in the conveyor belts all the time. So they used to have to shut down the whole plant and send a worker up there to try to cut out with the X-Acto knife all these film plastic bags that are wrapped into the conveyor belt. Worker safety issue, production issue, because you're having to shut down the whole plant. And it would make it basically was making it more costly for us as the folks paying for the service, because it just was hurting everybody. So that's where there was, and as an example, there's been a big push on don't put plastic bags out with your recycling, even though the bag manufacturers put a big recycle symbol on there and try to make it seem like you should recycle that bag. So just to the earlier points about it can be a challenge, and that's where the more information you can just help pass along from what we're learning today is helpful for everybody. For most of Massachusetts, cartons should go in the trash. However, some communities in western Massachusetts do recycle them. Do you remember I mentioned before there's the one public recycling facility in Massachusetts that they did put out in spring? That one's taking the cartons, interestingly enough, but the private sector ones are not, because they're probably not making as much money off of it, and that's what they're in the business to do. So based on this, we should not be putting the juice cartons in with our recyclables. I would imagine many folks still are doing it, perhaps, because I want them to be recycling this. Just because they're not making as much money off of it, to me, is not a reason why they should change all the rules all the time. And it should be more common sense for the folks who are generating it in the first place, you, me, and the other good folks. If you don't mind teeing up the Black Earth compost video, because one of the other things in town, the services that we try to promote, is food waste is one of the biggest things that people are still putting out in their trash. I know this polystyrene takes up a lot of space, but even, especially weight-wise, a lot of the stuff people are putting out is food waste. So 3 services, 2 services offered in town, through the town, but what some people do is just they compost in your own backyard. If you have the space, you don't have critters around, you can just create your own compost pile, mix it in with some of your food waste, in with your leaves, stuff like that. At the same time, critters could be a problem. So the town offers home composting bins at a greatly discounted rate. The state chips in a little bit to bring down the price, and the town does as well. They're $22, and it's a large plastic container that you can help compost your food waste in, and that can be secured through the town administrator's office. There's also a curbside service that we've sort of begun partnering with the last couple of years, that you'll see an increasing amount of folks. You see those, you got the 2 bins that the town gives you, the 2-wheeled carts, and then you see around town those little 13-gallon green, they're little green carts for the food waste composting, and that's Black Earth composting. So before the town started partnering with Black Earth, there were already roughly 50 households in town that on their own had contacted Black Earth for this curbside food waste service. So when I first started, I saw that, hey, some folks are doing that, and I talked to I've known Black Earth for a while from other things, and we partnered with the town of Ashland so that when we get to a certain number of households from the two towns that are part of their program, it's going to lower the price for all the folks by about 30%. So we're very close to meeting that 500 household threshold between the two towns. We now have over 200 households in Holliston that are using the Black Earth composting service. But it's really fascinating. Again, people wonder, hey, what's that little green thing at the curb? What's in there and where's it going? And it's a nice, just like the Harveys, a Massachusetts-based company. Personally, it's really good. There are international companies and national ones doing trash and recycling. Fine, but personally I like it when you can use a local company, Massachusetts-based. Same thing here with the Black Earth composting as a potential option. So this sort of explains a little bit how that all works. So it basically sort of shows the overall process. And again, compared to when we just composted in our backyard, we're letting Mother Nature just take its time to process, and maybe we turn it a little bit. But here they're mixing it with other materials, they're speeding it up, they're pumping air underneath it to help make sure it's at the right temperature, and then they process it here in Massachusetts so that then they, for each of the households in Holliston that have this curbside service, they get a coupon and they get a bag of the compost back as part of the service. So again, it's nice that it's coming back this way. And we ought to also thank those 200 households, 200 plus households, that they're also helping us as taxpayers in Holliston, because by them getting their food waste composted through this service as compared to it going in the trash, they're reducing the trash that we send to Millbury and we pay for. So they did over 3 tons of food waste through this program last year, which is pretty significant, and it's growing. So it's helpful for the town, but it's helpful for them and for overall sustainability.
What about the bones?
So, great question. I just heard the question was, what about the bones? So, not really appropriate for composting in your backyard. But they take bones. It's great. It was after Thanksgiving, one of the folks in the program said, it was great to toss the turkey carcass in that thing. Just, not have to deal with it. Because of the type of process they have and the machinery used, bones, their list was pretty comprehensive. Dairy products, again, because you don't really want to mix those in your home composting. That's one of the nice things about this particular service, is that it has a much more comprehensive.
You pay for this service?
This is a private subscription service between the household and Black Earth. So right now, before we started that program I mentioned in conjunction with Holliston, the program was $99 for 6 months. Once we started the program, it's now $89 roughly for 6 months for new signups. And when we get to that 500 threshold, it's going to drop to $65 for 6 months service. So that's where we're very close to that 500 threshold, and we're going to drop it. One thing on that same note I want to plug is back in April I mentioned we did that little food waste special with Black Earth. We also did a little outreach trying to increase awareness about especially the metal recycling that takes place down at the recycling center. And this is just a little informational sheet about the type of items that can be brought down there. Currently, there are a number of folks who put metal items out at the curb for collection from Harvey's, which is okay, but it ends up costing the town a lot of money for that service. And these are the type of items that sometimes that we're seeing Harvey pick up, that if you bring them down to the recycling center, it's not going to cost the town. The town will make a little money actually from the metal, perhaps to use for expanding the hours of the recycling center. Those are the type of things we're looking for, and it also saves the town from paying Harvey for that pickup. So this is just something for you to take home, and if you can take a look, great. That'd be good. So items such as like filing cabinets, metal chairs, bed frames, screen doors, metal barrels, fencing, treadmills, bicycles, metal fans, lamps, pots and pans, lawnmowers. I just need to have the fluids emptied on them. But if you've got an old metal lawnmower that you've been sitting in your basement or your garage, you've been trying to get rid of for whatever, get a little help, get it down and get the fluids out and get it down to the recycling center. It'll be recycled. The question was, can we recycle those hangers at the recycling center? Yes. Okay. But better yet is having them be reused. Because again, so much of our attention is, and I credit or blame the state for this, and my colleagues do too, focus on recycling, but that's the last thing we should be thinking about. The first part we should really focus on is reducing how much waste we generate in the first place. Then you don't have to worry about what to do with it, because you've been smart about your purchase in the first place. But then the next thing is reuse it if you possibly can, and that's where, thank you for your comment about a lot of a number of the dry cleaning places will take back those metal hangers. They're glad, they're saving money. Sure, they have to get cleaned, but they probably it's going to be less costly than having to buy a new metal cone hanger, so thank you very much for that. Actually, most of these smoke detectors can be tossed out as the trash. We'll double check on that one. But if you have a question about smoke detectors, or in particular, or like old fire hydrant, if you have one, call our fire department for advice. They'll give you the proper information on what to do. Because I don't think Clean Harbors also takes the old fire extinguishers either at their event. A lot of times I know in the past they have not. But feel free to, if you have any questions, go to the Sustainability Department page, because I'm the Sustainability Coordinator. You can always contact me, and I'm happy to follow up with any questions or good ideas or other type of services we should be looking at. Good. So thank you very much again.